This meeting is now being recorded.
Okay, Jessie, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Durrett, and I'm a program associate here at the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves. I have been leading our work around the SDGs as well as some of the other major advocacy moments of 2015, including COP21. These moments will be critical to the agenda setting for the next couple of years, and then going forward, actually closer to 15 years plus. So at this point, I'd like to have my colleague Sheila from ENERGIA introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Sheila Pracha. I'm the International Network Coordinator and Program Manager of the ENERGIA International Network on Gender Sustainable Energy. ENERGIA has been engaged in mainstream gender in the energy sector for the past 20 years, engaging in intergovernmental negotiation process is one of our strategies for mainstream gender into the sector, and we've been very happy to partner with key partners, including the Alliance on International Advocacy Activities, with a strong input from our membership in the 22 countries in Africa and Asia that ENERGIA is represented.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sheila. So Sheila and I will be presenting during this webinar. And as you can see from the slide that is currently up, the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves and ENERGIA have been working together to ensure that cooking energy and related issues are accurately and consistently integrated into the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. And during this webinar, we'll go through what that means exactly and why we've come to the rationale behind the reasons behind what we support in this agenda. So just for a little background information, up on the slide now is a little brief background on the Global Alliance and then also ENERGIA. Most of you are familiar at least with one organization, if not both, but I wanted to make sure that you saw this information. So of course, the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves focuses on clean and efficient cooking throughout the developing world, and our goal is 100 million households adopting clean and efficient cookstoves and fuels by 2020. And we work with ENERGIA not just on our advocacy work, but on other areas of our work, particularly as it relates to energy and gender issues. And Sheila spoke a little bit towards what ENERGIA's work is like. So for starting very broadly, I just wanted to introduce the global goals, which are also known as the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. So now that we're getting closer to the official adoption of these goals, people are beginning to market them as the global goals to really kind of spur the idea of buy-in across the world. So these goals are made up of 17 goals and 169 targets. The main, thrust behind the agenda is built off the Millennium Development Goals, but of course the agenda as a whole is much more comprehensive and includes issues like energy, which is very exciting for the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves and ENERGIA. So where these goals currently stand, and if you've been following this process at all, you know it's quite complicated, so let me kind of back up. These discussions around the development agenda have been going on now for years and years. But most recently, actually about almost exactly a month ago, member states of the United Nations approved the development goals and their targets. Now that isn't official, but it happened at the UN about a month ago. In this month, in September, the member states at a higher level will officially adopt these goals and targets, and therefore adopt the global goals. However, the indicator framework will not be set by the time that they adopt the goals and targets. They will call it a complete agenda. It will have an outcome document associated with it, but the indicator framework will not actually be finalized until March 2016. This process, of course, is very technical and detailed. Where it currently stands is there's an interagency expert group that is working on the indicator framework. And they have a number of ways that organizations can participate and feed into that process, which is what we and others are doing. So their next meeting is in October, and until September 7th, they have an open consultation that the Alliance, ENERGIA, and other partners of ours have been feeding into. And then, of course, the interagency expert group is made up of members, which are countries. So our work relates to ensuring that those countries that make up the expert group are informed on issues that are really close to our work and will influence other goals across the agenda. So our asks as we work on this agenda are both very specific and technical related to measurement, but of course our purpose is also to ensure that the understanding of how these issues relate to the success of the entire agenda are very clear, especially since they weren't largely included in the Millennium Development Goals. Just a little information on the problem itself, although I know that many of you are very familiar with it. So close to half the world's population lives in energy poverty, and that relates to both electricity and cooking energy. And this is, of course, a problem in itself, but it also drives a lot of other problems across development. And here I mentioned economic growth, environmental sustainability, public health, and gender equality. So what we're saying here is not only is it causing problems on its own, but it's preventing success in other areas. And here's a few stats. One I'll just note here is that 4.3 million people die prematurely every year due to household air pollution from cooking. So of course, there's a very strong connection to the Goal 3 on health and the Sustainable Development Goals. However, alternatively, if we are to comprehensively address the clean energy challenge, we can spur really substantial progress across other areas in the global goals. For example, health, environment, women's empowerment, and other areas. And so it's really important as we look at the Sustainable Development Agenda that we see not only the individual goals, but also the links between them. And here you can see some of the impacts that the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves has put together. And you can see this is just until 2020. So considering the global goals actually go to 2030, the impacts could be even larger. So the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves and ENERGIA has really weeded through the entire development agenda and the current drafts and the indicator framework and put together priorities that we see absolutely critical to getting cooking energy right in the agenda. And what we mean by that is consistently integrated and accurately integrated. Our recommendations as far as the indicator framework goes is fall under Goal 3 on health, Goal 5 on gender equality, and Goal 7 on energy. Of course, as I mentioned, our work also relates to the goals that focus on environmental issues and others, but these are the ones where our issue fits very clearly under the indicator framework. And these indicators will be very important not only at the very end of the development agenda at 2030 to see how successful we are, but also in the interim to guide our interventions and policy reforms at the international, regional, and national levels. And you can see here we mentioned disaggregated data. A little bit later in the presentation we'll talk about what that means exactly. I'm going to go into our recommendations more specifically. I'm sure some of you will have questions. We will get to those questions at the end, so definitely take note of what your questions are. Not only has the Alliance worked with ENERGIA on these recommendations, but also many of our other partners. For those of you who don't know, the Alliance has about 1,300 partners from across sectors, and the expertise that has fed into these recommendations have come across from many different partners. So right now in the draft indicator framework, there is an indicator on cooking energy under Goal 7 on energy and Target 7.1 on energy access. It reads, percentage of population with primary reliance on non-solid fuels. Now, the Global Alliance and ENERGIA are glad to see that this issue is part of the agenda, but we don't see this indicator as sufficient to measuring the issue as it stands, and it's not sufficient to guiding policy and intervention. So our recommendation for revising this is percentage of households primarily using clean and efficient cooking fuels and technologies. And so now we'll go through a little bit of the rationale as to how we came up with that revision. So for starters, you'll see that we use use instead of reliance or access, which we see as more practical to measure and more direct. So it's very clear what that means. They're using it or they are not. And of course, the use is critical. The consistent and accurate use is critical for achieving the benefits that we hope to see from cooking with clean and efficient cook stoves and fuels. Next, you'll see that we chose to measure this by household, not population, because people access household energy at a household level, and therefore we see that as important to measure. One of the biggest differences here is that the indicator that the Alliance and ENERGIA has put forth includes both technology and fuels. And the reason for doing that is, we know at the Alliance that cooking energy is so much more than just one piece of that. We can't actually solve the problem of how households cook with just one side of that. So we know that both sides of the equation are really critical, so we want to make sure that both fuels and technologies are measured. We also don't think that measuring non-solid fuels is sufficient enough because some very harmful fuels such as kerosene factor into non-solid fuels. They are liquid after all, but we know that kerosene, for example, has very significant harmful impacts. So we want to make sure that it's a little bit clearer than that and not just non-solid fuels. We also know that there's a spectrum of energy access, and that's important to measure efficient as well as clean, so that we understand the picture of energy that we're looking at. So as I note here that we think that this indicator will better capture the spectrum of household energy that exists, particularly as many households gain access to efficient technologies, but not yet clean fuels. And you can always take the example of fuels like electricity and LPG, where really significant infrastructure is necessary for households to address that, and that might not be available immediately. So I'm happy to talk about this indicator further with people as they have questions either in the chat box or on a one-on-one basis after this webinar, but that is some of the basic rationale that went into revising this indicator in particular. Going on to our indicator recommendations under Goal 3 on health, here we have two. So first of all, like the energy goal, there is an indicator already measuring air pollution, which of course directly relates to cooking energy. However, we do not see the indicator on air pollution as sufficient to measure the issues that relate to cooking energy. So under Goal 3, Target 3.9, the indicator currently reads population in urban areas exposed to outdoor air pollution levels above WHO guideline levels. And here there's two really big things missing. First of all, it only talks about urban areas, and of course that is not everyone in the world. So we want to make sure that it accounts for not just people living in urban settings, but also in peri-urban and rural settings, where issues like household air pollution are particularly pertinent. The other big thing missing is that it only talks about outdoor air pollution and not household air pollution. So we have simplified this indicator in our revision so that it says mean air pollution of particulate matter, and so that it's actually much broader and therefore includes ambient air pollution, outdoor air pollution, and household air pollution, which is indoor air pollution. And it also accounts for urban settings as well as rural and peri-urban settings, which is very important as we look to development across these different areas. Now, under the current set of indicators, there is nothing to measure the mortality related to this air pollution. So therefore, we have suggested adding the indicator that reads number of premature deaths attributable to ambient and household air pollution. The target itself actually mentions reducing the mortality related to pollution, including air pollution. So we see it as really important to actually measure the number of deaths. And that way we can kind of see if we're addressing the problem or not. So that's where those recommendations stand. We'll go to the next slide, which goes to our indicator recommendations under Goal 5 on gender equality. So it's good to note that this goal on gender equality is significantly more comprehensive than the goal on gender equality that was in the Millennium Development Goals. And one of the areas that this goal encompasses now for the next 15 years is unpaid work. So you don't see here, but there is another indicator that will measure unpaid work for caring domestic reasons, which doesn't specifically mention cooking, but of course we know that cooking-related activities, both fuel collection and cooking itself, contribute to unpaid work that often falls disproportionately on women and girls, therefore preventing them from full participation in the economy and educational opportunities. And we definitely support the inclusion of this indicator. However, on top of that indicator, we would also like to see an indicator that measures specific access to particular natural resources. So in the current draft of the indicator framework, there is a goal that says proportion of households within 15 minutes of nearest water source. However, we know that women and other people spend as much, if not more time collecting fuel as they do collecting water. So if we measure and therefore aim our interventions at addressing the amount of time that they are spending collecting water, but not the amount of time that they are collecting fuel, we won't actually address the real problem. And we want to make sure that these sustainable development goals actually get to the root of the problem and not just carry out some of the things that are most discussed. So we've revised this indicator to read proportion of households within 15 minutes of fuel and clean water, and therefore, excuse me, trying to get to the heart of the problem and the unpaid time that goes to natural resource management, both on fuel and water. We don't, as you see here, include clean fuel. We just specify clean for water because this is directed at addressing the time, not the type of fuel as much. And if you go back to looking at our suggested indicator under Goal 7 on energy, you'll see that we really want to look at the full picture beyond just clean fuels, but also biomass solid fuels as well. We want to look at both. So therefore, that's how the indicator currently stands. And this indicator is particularly important to both of the Alliance and ENERGIA because especially ENERGIA works to make sure that the energy gender nexus is understood across sustainable development efforts and particularly sustainable development goals. At this point, I'm going to hand the presentation off to Sheila of ENERGIA to discuss further, but as questions relate, we can come back to the specific recommendations later on in the presentation.
Thank you very much, Jessie. So aside from the indicators that Jessie has just spoken to, both ENERGIA and the Alliance strongly support including an umbrella statement for the disaggregation of data across all the Sustainable Development Goals. And in particular, we see this linked not only to cooking energy, but also to electricity access, to renewable energy, and to energy efficiency across the sphere of the gender and energy nexus. In terms of data disaggregation, by this, to be more specific, by this we mean on the basis of age, of sex, of geography, so that's urban, rural areas, peri-urban areas, across income, disability, race, ethnicity, and indeed other factors as they are relevant to monitoring inequalities and as making these inequalities far more visible. Specifically also with regards to households, we feel that indicators that relate to the household level must should disaggregate on the basis of the makeup of the household. We're also very pleased to report that following up from this recommendation, both the Alliance and ENERGIA, but other actors working in the gender and energy space are actually working very concretely on how to implement accurate and inclusive measurement practices, working with, for instance, the Global Tracking Framework and others, as I said, across the different energy subsectors. aside from this, to talk about the specific actions, advocacy actions that we are, that the Energy and the Alliance are engaged in on getting cooking right, but also in prioritizing the gender and energy nexus throughout the SDGs. I think we have shared, and you probably have seen the memo that both the Alliance and ENERGIA have developed. We're pleased to report that we have had 20 organizations and continue to receive more that have signed up to the memo. We're also working to support the interagency expert group and doing this very importantly through our partners in Africa. Specifically, we've targeted the partners that are part of the member states of the interagency expert group, and this is in Africa, where we have our energy and network members and our partners have very good links to the national statistical offices, supporting them with inputs linked to cooking energy, but also linked to developing gender-sensitive indicators for the energy efficiency and the renewable energy and electricity. Participating in stakeholder consultations that are being led by the National Statistic Office, and also supporting their inputs in the intergovernmental negotiation process. We're also going to be making contributions to the online consultations that is being led by the interagency expert group that is currently taking place and will end on the 7th of September. And we are participating in events held by Sustainable Energy for All, but also other actors linked to the SDGs and the SDG implementation. And of course, through this webinar, but also through other means, sharing the recommendations and explaining them and just supporting input from partners. Moving forward, based on the work that we have been doing, but also based on the processes that has been laid out by the interagency expert group on the development of indicators, we have laid down the following next steps. One, we would like to invite and welcome all our partners, but also particularly those that have joined this webinar, to join us in and sign up to the joint statement. And this can be done by sending an email to the email address that is there on the slide. That's post/2015 at cleancookstoves.org. We also encourage you to contribute to the online consultation, which, like I said, is ending on September 7th. You can make your recommendations and proposals through the consultation. If you are living or working or engaged in the countries that are member states of the intergovernmental agency, we encourage you to contact your statistical offices and other departments like the Department of Energy and provide your recommendations and priorities. We'd also be very pleased if you could let us know how you're engaging in the SDG process and whether you're going to be there in New York in the September high-level meeting, but also if you're going to Bangkok, where the Intergovernmental Expert Group will be meeting. The Alliance and ENERGIA are available and be very happy and willing to explain the indicators that we are proposing and that we are recommending in much more detail, and to support you in your efforts to also advocate for these. Thank you very much, Jessie.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm back now. Okay. At this point, we'd like to invite anyone to ask questions about the various things we have discussed so far in this webinar. Yet again, you ask questions by writing your questions into the public chat box on the webinar system. Just for organizational sake, we don't take them by voice, so please type them in there. As we are waiting for questions, I just wanted to point out that you can see that the Alliance, and in conjunction with partners with ENERGIA, like ENERGIA, of course, is is definitely contributing more and more to these kind of advocacy efforts. Now that we are coming up on our 5-year anniversary, which you'll hear much more about on our website and through other vehicles, we have more to share and contribute to important international conversations like the Sustainable Development Goals than we had when we first launched. So definitely think about the Alliance, and I think I can speak for ENERGIA here as well, but of course I'll let Sheila add her voice to this. Think about if you have questions about these processes or what our recommendations might be relating to the SDGs and other international moments, please do think of us as a resource so that we can feed our expertise both internally and from our external partners into these processes. Someone just wrote, how do we submit questions? And as the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves, you just type them into that box right there. And I will facilitate answering the questions. Either myself, Sheila, will answer them, or if they're incredibly detailed, we can follow up after the webinar by email or phone directly.
Julie, I just wanted to say that Elizabeth Sosowski, who is also one of the leading gender and energy experts for ENERGIA, is also online, and she can also support us in answering the questions. Elizabeth has also been involved in this whole process.
Wonderful. Looks like people might be working on their questions, but I'm not sure. And as Sheila mentioned, both the ENERGIA and the Alliance will be present around some of these major moments coming up, both in New York in September, and then ENERGIA will be present at the next meeting of the Interagency Expert Group on the Sustainable Development Goals, which will be taking place in Bangkok in October. And then this goes a little bit beyond the SDGs, but as you've probably figured out, the SDGs and COP21, the climate negotiations, are definitely related, as the SDGs cover environmental issues, and we know that environment and climate issues are definitely linked to development issues more broadly. So we will be, there in Paris in December, but also feeding into that process and bringing the issue of clean cooking and other energy issues to the discussion. Ellen, thank you for your question. The question from Ellen, just want to make sure that I have it right yet. So, a lot more questions are coming in, so let me just go back to the top here. So starting with Ellen, her question reads, I was wondering whether you had any ideas about how to mobilize financing for countries to design and undertake data collection and tracking, or how to get countries to do this. That's a very important question, Ellen. Thank you for asking that, and it's one that we probably won't be able to fully answer at the moment. But, as the Sustainable Development Goals are adopted, a bunch of different resources will be directed to their fulfillment and their measurement. There are different sources that are being directed, and resources and capacity building that are being directed to the groups that will be in charge of measuring, including statisticians in country. Although, as you probably guessed, probably not sufficient resources. And then for the indicators that we're talking about here, they all have lead agencies in the UN. So for example, under the energy goal, Sustainable Energy for All, a UN initiative will take leadership in terms of making sure that those indicators are measured. And then under Goal 3 on health, as you might have guessed, WHO will take leadership on making sure that those indicators are measured. And many of the indicators that are under Goal 3 on health in particular are already measured in other ways. For example, the mortality indicator that we're suggesting is included, that's already measured as part of the burden of disease that WHO measures annually. So some of that is already there. Sheila or Elizabeth, do you have more to add on this in-depth question that I have not sufficiently answered?
I'm pleased with the response that you have given, Jessie. Elizabeth? Maybe we can go into the next question.
I'll also say that groups like SDSN, which stands for Sustainable, I actually don't remember what it stands for, but SDSN and other groups are having discussions really about the importance of making sure that these indicators are measured appropriately and all of that. So I would say that there is good conversation going on about the importance of measuring these accurately and making sure that they're measured in all the countries that are part of this agreement. But you're right that targeted resources will be necessary. Excuse me. So the next question is from Erica, and the question reads, what are the main challenges to overcome for higher adoption considering social aspects? That is a huge question that the Alliance works to address literally every day of our efforts, and I definitely won't be able to sufficiently answer now. I mean, the challenges are at every level. They're from supply challenges, making sure that the technologies and fuels that are necessary for adoption are available to the people that want to use them. It's also true on the demand side, so making sure that consumers are aware of the benefits of using these technologies and fuels and that they take action to actually fully adopt these technologies and fuels. You know, that is a whole layer of really mass communication that needs to take place, and that the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves is working on more and more now that we're in phase 2 of our strategic business plan. We see that, you know, people know what they are used to, and of course that isn't necessarily clean cooking. So those are some of the biggest challenges that we see. The Alliance is also doing more and more work these days to understand what we mean by adoption and making sure that the idea of adoption is really clearly understood and what it will take to have households have consistent adoption of these technologies and fuels, because that's where we see these benefits. You know, if they're not actually fully adopting them or they use them for a little bit but not consistently, then the benefits will not be as substantial. Does anyone else on the phone call, either from the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves or ENERGIA, want to add to answering this question from Erica?
Yes, I believe Elizabeth wants to. I wonder if Julie could unmute her mic.
Hi, Elizabeth Zaselsky here from ENERGIA. I just wanted to mention as a sort of macro challenge that we face is really gender inequality in investment in the energy sector, that cooking energy does not receive as much attention and investment still as electricity does, in spite of the two targets under the energy access goal for both cooking and electricity. According to the latest Global Tracking Framework report in 2015, the electricity target is on track to be met, but the cooking target is falling behind. So for us, for ENERGIA, this is a gender issue, that cooking is not receiving as much investment. Thank you.
Elizabeth, that's a very good point, and that's one of the social challenges that we see. And do I have an echo? Can you hear me right? I hope it sounds all right to all of you. Erica, thank you for that question. As I mentioned at the start, of trying to answer it is pretty broad, so I would direct you to our website. And then if you have additional questions, feel free to email the email address that's here on the webinar, which is host-2015@cleancookstoves.org, or you can always email our general email inbox, which is info@cleancookstoves.org for further questions, and we'd be happy to get back to you and have a conversation in this area. Our next question is from Tim. He asks, could you clarify the gender indicator, the one that he's referring to is the one that says within 15 minutes of fuel and clean water. Yes, does this time include collecting and queuing for the resources? Does it include there and back? And how does it address affordability? So these are very good questions, Tim. So as it's currently written, it only includes there, getting to the resource. And the reason that in our revision it does that is because that is how the indicator on the water, access to the water was written. So we wanted to just make sure that fuel was incorporated in that without complicating the indicator significantly. I know that there are discussions currently taking place about how to better incorporate not just the time getting there, but the time there and back and queuing, like you suggest in the case of water in particular, but also possibly relevant relating to filling up LPG canisters or otherwise, and then of course collecting for fuel. So in our current discussion revision, it doesn't include that, and we would be open to discussing that further, how people might see that rewrite possible if it could be done in a way that could be measured. But right now we see the simplistic measurement being a little, comprehensive in the sense that it addresses both fuel and water, but also feasible to measure, whereas adding in queuing and other things may be not possible to measure. You also mentioned affordability. You are definitely right that the indicator as it currently stands under the gender goal definitely does not address affordability at all. It actually gets more to the heart of people who aren't paying for their fuel or maybe even water. So they're going somewhere to collect it probably for free, which is a different issue than affordability, of course. We wanted to make sure that this aspect of the problem was measured. Of course, it can't measure every aspect of the problem. The affordability component you'll see measured more so under Goal 7 on energy. So affordability, of course, is a challenge to adoption and will factor into our ability to be able to reach the target on energy access. And particularly because the goal in energy relates to all. It says very specifically sustainable access to energy for all. So affordability will factor into that very seriously. It isn't currently mentioned in the indicator. If you have suggestions on how to better integrate it into that, definitely let us know. But I think the way we currently see it written, we don't see that possible. But of course, we will see our indicators. The results of measuring our indicators will not be as favorable if we're not able to address the affordability challenge. So that's definitely something that the Alliance and ENERGIA and many of our other partners are really working to address. And I'll just briefly say, from the Alliance's standpoint, we work on that both on a supply and demand area, but then also from a policy area where we're working with governments to look at their tariffs that relate to energy resources. So we definitely are taking affordability as a main charge of our efforts, even if it's not accurate in here very, exactly, it's not directly mentioned. Does anyone from ENERGIA have anything to say about that question from Tim? No? Okay.
Hi, this is
yet again if you want. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
This is Elizabeth again. I think Corinne, you hit on some of the issues with this indicator. We have to remember that this is not a current indicator, so it would really need to be further developed if we could get the principle of having this indicator included. And some of the issues are we just talking about fuel wood? Is it, animal waste, agricultural waste? And of course the modern fuels that people spend a lot of time looking for modern fuels that are affordable. They spend, was that Jesse and not Corinne? You sound similar. They spend time queuing to get LPG or kerosene. And then also the processing and preparation time, there's many issues there, and affordability. But remember, ETF does include affordability and some of these other areas, and that this particular indicator is is under the goal on gender equality, not the goal on energy, and it's specifically referring to women's unpaid labor. So it's a subset of women's unpaid labor, which is a very important subset, which is the time spent on fuel and water. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, and as many of you may know, much of the Alliance's work, I mean, the Sense we would launch has focused on integrating a gender lens into our work. And so, part of the rationale for doing that, although, it's also just a smart plan that we've seen success in, but is also that we know that if women around the world in developing countries are spending their time collecting fuel and water and managing natural resources, it will be particularly difficult for them to fully participate in community activities, educational activities, economic, income generating activities. So we see measuring this unpaid work as really important. Even if we can't add in every multifaceted input into the indicator, it's important to measure on its own, and we want to make sure it's noted as part of the Sustainable Development Agenda. We have another question here. I'm pulling it up from Abby. She says, under ENERGIA and Alliance's advocacy efforts, are efforts being made to more widely integrate women themselves into political processes and policy-making bodies of countries, particularly African governments? So that speaks a little bit to what I just said. So I'll just briefly say something and then let ENERGIA say anything there. So the Alliance's efforts do not focus on getting women into government at all. We definitely work with a lot of women in government who care substantially about these issues because of their relation to women's, empowerment. So, for example, in Ghana, we work really closely with our Leadership Council member, Foreign Minister Hannah Tete, and we're working more and more with female politicians around the world to make sure that they see this issue as critical. We don't have any efforts to get more women in these decision-making power positions, but we do see our work as an enabling factor to making sure that women have the real possibility of full participation, not just the right, but the actual practical ability to do it based on the other responsibilities that they are working on. Elizabeth or Sheila, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you. Well, as part of ENERGIA's advocacy strategies, we certainly feel that the credibility of our recommendations, our advocacy recommendations, build on the voices and the participation of women, women in the South, particularly the women that we are targeting and working with, and also women that are engaging at the policy level. So we do try to create spaces where women are able to participate in energy policy and political processes, like, for instance, the Sustainable Energy for All country action agenda processes and the investment perspectives processes. Bringing the priorities of women and bringing the voices of women into those spaces is something that we do, creating a platform for that. In particular, we're working on this in Senegal, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and in Nepal, in Indonesia, and also together with other partners. Also, specifically supporting the participation of women to SE4 international forums as well, and like we said. Also to the SDG processes. So with particular references to the SDG members of gender and energy networks within the member countries in Africa, where ENERGIA is also has a strong presence in Botswana, in Senegal, in Tanzania and Uganda. they're working very closely and providing inputs to the statistical bureaus and other departments in this process. So they'll actually be participating in multi-stakeholder consultations that are being held by the National Statistics Bureau related to this, but also coming together with their country delegations and providing support and input at the international intergovernmental negotiation processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. And just one more thing there, we also support the full integration and empowerment of women throughout the value chain in the clean cooking sector. This is getting back to the Alliance's efforts here, of why it might not be at the ministerial level or the parliamentary level. We definitely see the participation, the full participation of women throughout the economy and government bodies is really important. You can learn more about our work to do that on our website. I'm going to move on to our next question now from Natalie. It's a long question, so I'm going to summarize, but basically she's asking what our participation and engagement will be at COP21. It isn't out of context. We definitely appreciate your question on this issue. A little further off, we don't have as much clarity, at least on the Alliance side. But I can tell you that we'll definitely be there in Paris, a number of Alliance staff members, and we'll be engaged in a number of ways. The Alliance is coordinating with the United Nations Foundation and a couple of other organizations to host a side event, an official side event. And then we are also in discussions about how we might have unofficial events as well, specifically focusing on research issues within the clean cooking sector and some of their arenas as well. So we will be making our engagement at COP more public, so do look to our website for more information. I wouldn't expect it immediately, but we'll definitely post it as soon as we know more. And also feel free to reach out to us. You can use the info@cleancookstoves.org email address to learn more about our engagement at COP. And if you plan to be there, you and your organization plan to be there, definitely let us know, and maybe there'll be opportunities to have a meeting or organize together. Energia, do you have anything to add to that question about COP?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jessie. We will be at COP21. The Sustainable Energy for All Global Facilitation team will be hosting together with the UNFCCC Secretariat an Energy Day. I've tried to ask for the particular date for that Energy Day, but I think that hasn't been known. But there is going to be an Energy Day at COP21, and both the Alliance and ENERGIA will be at the COP, and we will be engaged in the Energy Day. Once we get more information, that's still to come. Aside from that, ENERGIA has put in a proposal for a side event, and as you know, there's been a lot of trying to merge different side events and get some other venues. Waiting to hear from the Secretariat that we will have a side event on gender and energy issues, and we'll be happy to send more information on the date and the agenda for the side event if we do get side events.
Great, thanks, Sheila. And yeah, as Sheila points out, many of the things around COP are in flux just because of the decision making at the highest levels of the UNFCCC. But we're definitely planning to be involved, and do let us know if you and your organization are planning to be present and what your engagement looks like. We have another question from Avro, but I'll read it out loud and then direct it back to Sheila because it relates to ENERGIA's work. The question says, can you speak a bit more about ENERGIA's work in Senegal and who the local partners are? Thank you. Sheila, can you answer that question?
Thank you very much. I'll answer it very quickly. Thank you very much for the question. Our local partners in Kenya are Enda Tiazamond, who's quite well known for doing development work, not just in Senegal, but within the within the region and in Francophone countries. but they also work a lot on energy and environment. And also work with key actors like the Rural Electrification Agency and the Ministry and other key partners. We're also working with GBEV International, and both with ENDA and with GBEV we're working in three main areas. One in Women Entrepreneurship Development Program in two areas in the south of Senegal, so supporting women entrepreneurs to scale up energy access there. The second is in gender mainstreaming in key actors programs. So I've said the Rural Electrification Agency and also working with the Ministry. The third is working with the Sustainable Energy for All process, getting gender into the action agenda and the investment prospectus and all other processes linked to that. Rolling out, translating the global campaign on energy, women, children and health, which was launched in June 2014 at the national level in Senegal, and working with celebrities and with other sort of media to roll that out. So those are some of the key activities. You might be aware that the ECOWAS region is the first region to have developed regional policy on energy and women's economic empowerment. This was led by a lot of work was done by Ellen Morris's group together with ICRI and with ECOWAS. And so translating that policy to the national level is also something that ENERGIA with its national partners and with others are going to be involved in. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. We'll wait a few more minutes to see if anyone else has any questions. And in the interim, I know that we have a little bit of crossover from ENERGIA and Alliance partners since we're co-hosting this webinar. So for those of you that are interested in learning more about one or both of the organizations, the website address for the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves is cleancookstoves.org, and the website for ENERGIA is energia.org. And we have, in addition to the statement being listed here in the PowerPoint, the joint statement that we worked on together about the cooking energy and the indicator framework, we also have that statement listed on both of our websites, so you can go there and see it and write to either organization about joining it. I have added here, as you see, the post-2015@cleancookstoves.org email address, which you can email to sign up to that statement. Like Sheila mentioned earlier, we have over 20 organizations from around the world have already signed up to join the statement, and all that really entails is sending us your logo, and we'll add it to the statement so it shows that you support the recommendation. Do we have any other questions coming in? I'll just wait a few more minutes, but I understand you guys have been asking very good, great questions so far, so there might not be any more. I'll also just bring attention to one of the points that Sheila made at the end as well, and that is currently up on the slide, that these, and I'll expand a little bit, because people are really looking to hear from countries that are members of the Interagency Expert Group on the Sustainable Development Goal indicators, but also just from developing countries in general. This entire agenda is meant to be much more inclusive in the Millennium Development Goals, and particularly the voices of implementers, the voices of the people that will really be making the transformational change behind the Sustainable Development Goals are really appreciated. So whether it's in New York around the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, or at national and regional levels as national governments figure out how to implement these high-level global aims, then it's really, if you have something to say, if you want to get involved in the process at a national, regional, or international level, I definitely would urge and recommend that you do so. We've seen so far that statistics offices are really looking for input from people that have expertise in these different areas, so definitely consider getting involved there. I just got a question from Elisa. It says, can you further comment on your proposal for indicator 7.1? So I'm going to go back to that slide. Lisa, if you have specific questions, it'd be helpful if you could write them into the chat box, because I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but I can talk a little bit more about it. So goal 7 is on sustainable development. It's on sustainable energy. And then target 7.1 is on specifically related to energy access, whereas 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3 are focused on efficiency and renewable energy. So I'll go back to the beginning of so right now there is an indicator on cooking energy. As it reads, it only addresses the reliance on non-solid fuels, which means that it is not addressing the technology part of that. And it also means, non-solid fuels is a pretty basic definition, because we know that non-solid fuels like kerosene are liquid, but they have significant harmful impact. So we don't really want to group them into fuels like LPG and ethanol and electricity that are actually much cleaner and have, if used consistently, can have huge positive health impacts. So we have suggested revisions to make sure that the indicator is very clear, is measured on a household level, accounts for both the fuel and technology component of the cooking energy, but then also accounts for both clean and efficient. So, we have we want to count the households that are using, electricity, LPG, ethanol, solar to cook their food, which of course is closer to the clean spectrum of things. But we also want to count the households that are still using biomass like wood and pellets and other types of solid fuels, but are doing so in a more efficient manner. So they're using improved cook stoves that still use these cheap fuels that are available to them, but do it more efficiently, which of course most definitely helps us achieve some of our environmental goals around fuel usage, and is important to understanding the fuel spectrum that, the energy spectrum that exists in our world. So not everyone is going to have access to the cleanest technologies and cleanest fuels tomorrow or in the next 10 years even. So we want to make sure that efficient is also part of the equation. It sounds like Elisa has added a little bit more to her question. So she's added, are you planning to endorse the WHO definition of clean fuels and technology? So that's an important and interesting question, because the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves is working with the International Organization of Standardization to create international standards for technologies, for cooking technologies and fuels. Now, we're also always coordinating with WHO. WHO, I believe last year, released their indoor air quality guidelines that are now being rolled out by region. So we factored into that process on the WHO indoor air quality guidelines, and then the indoor air quality guidelines and the ISO tiers, the International Organization of Standardization tiers that are in draft form now, but will be we are working on finalizing, will be integrated to the point that they line up. So the different tiers of how clean and how efficient are defined will line up across the measurement. So we definitely are working together on that. I hope that answers your question. And if you have more detailed questions, definitely write us and I can try to answer them, or more likely point you in the right direction of an expert that can give you a better idea of where those processes stand. Do we have any more questions from participants? And if you think of more questions, definitely feel free to email us. And if you or your colleagues watch this webinar on YouTube later, once it's posted, you can also feel free to write us your questions then. Any more questions, anyone? It doesn't sound like it. So I will just say thank you so much for all of you for joining. We really appreciate you listening to what our work around some of the major advocacy moments this year looks like. And we really appreciate your interest in learning more about what getting cooking energy in the SDG integrated framework really looks like. So thank you so much for joining. Sheila, do you want to say anything to wrap up?
Yeah, just to join you, Jessie, in thanking everyone for participating and in their very useful questions, and to say that both ENERGIA, but more specifically Jessie and I, are available to continue to respond to questions, and we look forward to you joining us in this very important, in what we feel is a very important advocacy initiative in relation to the gender and energy nexus. Thank you.
Yes, definitely second everything that Sheila just said. Thank you so much all for joining. I think if that's it, we can ask Julie, who started us off, to close the webinar. Julie, is there anything else that you need to say? Nope. Okay. Thank you all very much. We appreciate you joining this call and for listening to what we have to say.
Thank you. Bye-bye.